Hey all, welcome back to Big Square Gaming. We're going to be doing our rebuild 7 Days to Die. This is going to be our second build. We're going to start off by just giving you a quick tour around. So obviously you've seen the front and the sides. Moving on to the back now. I'm going to try this a slightly different way from the way I've done the previous ones. Mostly because up to this point I kind of kept stopping and starting in the last video, and I don't think that quite worked properly, so I've decided this time to just let the video run, obviously sped up since it takes around 3 to 4 hours to do one of these builds, and I'm just gonna kind of chat and walk through it as we go. So a little bit fast forwarding and some of it will be quiet, and we'll just see how it goes from there. So this time we're going to try not jump around too much. We are starting on the ground floor and we need to clear out the debris that's settled down, and we're going to shoot that. So this time we are doing the offices that were across the street from the last one. This is the View Offices building. So the good thing with this building is that some of the floor, walls and ceiling are still intact, which means we can get a feeling for what the paint would have been, which is going to allow it easier when we're coming to decorate it. The downside, however, is that the front of the building has completely collapsed, so we have no idea how the layout would have been at the front, but we can certainly give it a go and try match it in so it has the same feel. I don't overdo the walls in those situations, I do tend to leave it as is, but it's always best guess as to how it did look. So I utilise the wooden blocks here that can be put down and picked up to flatten down the ground that's actually built up underneath the blocks. It is part of the development where they raise the ground through the block so that they can get the effect they're trying to achieve, but unfortunately that then sticks out through the finalised block, which we don't want. When you place a block, it flattens the ground underneath the block to do with the way it all sits. So if you then place one over it, it should push it down. It doesn't always work, and sometimes you do have to delete the block that it's actually sitting in, as I had to do with some of them. But most of the time, if you just put a frame down, it then flattens down the ground and you can just pick it back up again. So one of the things you always need to try to do is match the initial block size to the shape that's already there. The best way to do this is the copy shape and copy rotation buttons that you can get when you press R and hold over the blocks that can be manipulated, and that's probably the easiest way to match it in with the building blocks that are already there. You can do the same with the painting function and copy that, and it's the quickest way to do it. The biggest issue with doing any build is the structural integrity, and so when you're trying to rebuild, if you try to put anything in above and when you haven't secured below, this could cause problems and actually cause what still stands to collapse on yourself. The easiest way I found to do this is to put the overall arching walls in, which would be the main corners and the main pillar walls all the way around the building. This then supports anything that you're going to put in, whether it be flooring, roofs or any other side pillars plus cross beams. It will support it going forward and prevent the building from collapsing. That is assuming that the devs initially developed it to be able to stand on its own. Sometimes these buildings, I have found when you start doing them, even when completely built, would actually collapse under the wrong weight. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So at this point we have the left side of the building rebuilt, bar the outer barrier and the windows at this point, although we do also still need to take the old windows out. But we actually are starting to get a feel for the structure of the building now, because we do have this side up. The side where there was no windows and no walls left from both this and the other made it hard to decide how that window was supposed to look. I could have split it up a little bit, but it was a slightly shorter building block, so I figured we would just leave it as a whole and see how it goes. Large area paint is your friend, it really does do it quickly. There are two versions of this. There's painting a big block, and then there's painting every block like that is unpainted and connected that it auto does. They're really great features. It makes doing it really quickly. However, as you can see, there are some downsides to it, because you do unfortunately accidentally sometimes paint over bits that you don't intend to, or you do plan on painting as a different colour to begin with. It's more annoying, to be fair, when you paint over something unintentional and end up painting an entire wall that you then have to go and individually change. So at this point I'm trying to work out the best way to do the front of this. As you can see, there is already a bit that was still standing, and I did think that I was going to take it away and try my best to try and make something work. The whole front of the building being gone makes it more complicated because I don't quite know how to make that work. So after looking at some more, I've now decided that I don't think that the large 2 square wide window on the side fits with the rest of the properties. It might fit on the ground floor, but it certainly isn't going to work with the upper floors that do only have 1 wide windows. So I think at this point I decided that I was going to minimize that down and make that a bit more like 1 window wide. Once I did this with the window, I definitely felt, looking back at it from a slightly distance, it actually worked better and it definitely felt more appropriate for the building than the 2 wide had done, and I was much more comfortable with how it looked. So one of my absolute favourite parts of this building was the slatted detail on the outside that was on either side of the building. It added a different change to the building from the other ones around it, made it stand out, and it gave it that different look, the same way the panels did on the first building. And I really love that about it because it just made it a little bit more different from everything around it. And it's a very nice use of something that you would never think to use in that way. I will give the people who designed these buildings their dues. They did some great things to really make the buildings seem different with such a limited palette. Designing the front was always going to be a complicated process. When the front of the building didn't exist and there's nothing to work in, you can only go around the sides to really work with. But then on top of that, the outside of a building is always designed to pop out from the front, because that's the bit that most people see. And when companies are trying to make an impact with the architecture, it's usually the front that gets that boost. I did return the bit that I took away to begin with, because I figured that it was there to start with. It should be the one bit that I allow, and then I tried to mimic it above it so that it kind of popped it to give me something to go with when going further up the building. I then tried to establish the windows that would go within it. Again, all these changes, all these different options, just trying to make it work really in a way that gave the front that little bit of a difference from the sides, but still maintaining the same feel of the building. The tricky part when removing the windows and any doors is that you risk hitting the blocks nearby that you've just spent all this time fixing. It can be a little frustrating, and also getting the windows to sit in the right way round, and you put them in and then they're wrong, and then you have to take them back out, and then you end up shooting the block around it. It can get a little frustrating, but a bit of patience, you do tend to get there. I was really happy with how the front turned out. I thought it looked really good in the end. It did take a little bit of work to get it right, but I think the choice of the smaller windows to the side and the larger ones in the middle with the small indentation really made the front stand out different from the rest of the walls, which was essentially what we were trying to achieve. I really do think it worked, and I was really happy with the result. Finally reaching the back end of the building, there is actually a lot less damage here, which made it a lot quicker to fix. Mostly it was taking away the few bits of the wall that were actually damaged and replacing the windows in the same style of the rest of the building. There was a fire escape also built that we had to do a little bit of work on, but in general most of the back was intact. So that is the main parts of the outside now done for all walls, with really exception being the roof and the little bit that's built on top of the roof, which we will do separately. So because we are now going to look at doing the inside, we really do need to get support pillars that go up the middle of the inside of the building, up and supported to ensure that any of the floors that we're adding in the building are going to stand. The outside walls are there, they act as a great support, but obviously depending on the weight of the block and the type of the block will change dramatically how much that it can take before the floor collapses. So in this situation there's always going to be supporting walls within it. Often there will be a singular pillar that runs up all the way, whether that be in the middle or in this situation I believe there's 3 or 4 that run sort of round the quarter sections, and that holds it up. And that's a good way to ensure, if you do that first, that anything you're doing within the building should not collapse. So just like the prior video, when I'm doing these, I tend to take away any internal objects that are in the building and treat it like the building is going to be empty, and someone will come along later and decide what the rooms are going to be and put it in. Obviously, if people would like to see me do internal work, we can, but the idea being, like I said, it's a bit like viscera cleanup detail. We've come along after the incident, we're cleaning it up, so all we're doing is emptying it out and getting it ready for somebody to come back in. I do on occasion do the insides of the buildings, but there's so many buildings that I want to get through, and I really want to have a look at doing some of the bigger ones that we've never got to before. So I might save doing the insides for one of them after we get the outside done, and then do a separate building on that. I also potentially, if people are interested, could do a completely separate series around doing the insides, which would be taking these buildings that have been complete and then building them out to actually flush them out to be something else on the inside, which may change internal walls and adding in things like that. But for the moment, I really just want to bring it back to what it was, using the paints that were there if they're available, trying to establish the walls that were there if I can work out what they are, and in this situation, for example, even copying the double floating roof. So just working my way through it. So because we don't have the roof on at this stage, we are obviously going to fall foul of the weather. In this situation, as you can see, the game has produced a thick fog, which, as we do not have an enclosed building, is currently feeding into the building we're standing in. It does become a little bit annoying when you're trying to do some of this, but that is something to be said. If you want to put the roof on straight away to prevent that, you absolutely can, and make sure your windows are in and enclosed. But for me, it doesn't bother me too much, so I'm just quite happy for it to occur and keep on working through. So obviously, as playing through, we do have zombies turned off and we do have other things, but as you can see, the actual building stuff still exists. So in that situation, there was a false floor with a trap. I did stand on it and I have fallen through it. Now obviously I do have God mode turned on, so from that perspective I didn't really take any damage, and it was very limited fall anyway. But these things still do exist, I still trigger them, and it is handy to walk the floor when doing a building so that you can find them and actually remove them. You can usually see them from underneath, so it's not a problem. Sometimes the traps are completely hidden, but that means you can actually complete the building and remove all the traps as well, so that later on, if you're walking through it again, you don't accidentally trigger it and then have to fix it, which can be very, very annoying. I didn't walk this building to begin with, and I really should have done, because there was 3 or 4 of these that I then had to fix as I occurred, and I finished the room that was below, so it was very frustrating to have to keep going back and fixing them. So it is worth trying to remember that these things do still exist, even though zombies and other things are turned off. So at this point I am just about finished with this floor. That will be the ground floor done. I know that depending on where you are in the world, sometimes you call it the first floor. Obviously for me it's the ground floor and then 1, 2, 3 and up. So that would be the ground floor done. All the painting is done. I did find another trap as I came up the stairs, as you can see, but I've kind of just covered that over and we'll move forward. We now need to get the second floor finished. So you'll see here that there's a frustrating block that no matter what I do, paint is the same way. Now this is to do with the shape of the block that I've chosen because we're using half blocks instead of full. In this case it was the L block that I used. I probably should have just taken it away and either put a slanting block on or changed it to a full block and just had it jutting out to get the painting to work correctly, but then the shape would have been wrong. It's always a bit of a battle when you have the block shape versus what you can actually paint. Some of them do come with additional stripes on them that you can actually paint separately and some of them don't. So sometimes it's worth just playing with the blocks until you can find the one you want. At this point I had been doing this for a good few hours now, so I kind of just wanted to get on and get it finished, so I just pushed through, but I may go back at a later date and actually fix that. So at this point I have remembered that you can change the paint on the blocks themselves before you place them, save you painting, but what it does is it does that paint job for the entire block all the way around, not just for one side. So I remembered that since this is double-sided that I want to do anyway, I figured why not just set it up and go, and it saves me painting the roof further down the line. So that is another floor complete and I'm ready to push on. Obviously I am excluding the stairwells from that principle. I'm treating them slightly separately and they're just kind of getting done ad hoc as I go. The roof obviously will also need to get finished towards the end, but we're just going to keep pushing through each level. So if anyone hasn't seen my first video and they're wondering why I keep using this slatted door, the reason for that is it's one of the few doors in the game that exists that doesn't have the barricading information on it. So when you get a lot of these, because this is a zombie apocalypse game, they all have wood hammered over them, or they all have some kind of block on them, or they're broken in some way. So it's one of the few doors in the game that isn't broken, and it just comes in a variety of colours. So I just find it's the easiest door to do without ending up having it continually looking like a apocalypse. I can't get away with it with the glass doors on the front, unfortunately. There are limitations to that, but it's at least better than nothing. So at this point I realised that I haven't actually finished the roof down the stairs, and I realised that I kind of do need to go do that and get the bottom layer finished. So I'm just going to finish this wall, and then I do head back down the stairs to get the roof finished. So with the painting just about done, that is this floor almost complete, and we can move on to the final one to finish. So the whole building's now complete. I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. The front is looking really good, given that I had no idea how it looked. And obviously we're going to do some before and after shots so we can get a feel for what each of them looks like. There's the front. I think it looks particularly good. I'm trying to take these from the same place so it gives you a better feeling. There's our left side of the building with it rebuilt and reconstructed. The back of the building, which didn't actually have that much to do to it. I didn't get that from quite the same angle, but I will try to do that better for the next time. And then obviously the right hand side of the building. So if you have enjoyed this, obviously please do give us like a subscribe. It really does help the channel. We will leave this one here. We're going to go on to do another building again soon. So obviously keep a lookout for that and enjoy yourselves all. Thank you.